Hi everyone, welcome to the Crypto Conversation. Slightly different podcast for you today. I'm just going to run through some data points related to the Bitcoin halving and, of course, the Bitcoin ETF stuff. So we're going to look at all of that today. So there's no guest, it's just me talking to myself. Glad to have your company. Now, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or in Spotify as an audio podcast, you can do that. That's fine. But I do recommend if you've got time, just go along to YouTube and watch it on YouTube. You'll find the video on the Brave New Coin YouTube channel, because I'm using various charts, tweets, all sorts of data points today. And yeah, if you can follow along and see what I'm talking about, that will help. But otherwise, do feel free just to listen as a normal audio podcast. Just before we do get started, let's give a warm welcome and a shout out to our new sponsor, Coinsbee. More crypto honey for your crypto money. Of course, Coinsbee, the website is coinsbee.com. And there's a link in the show notes, which will help you find all sorts of interesting ways to spend your crypto, earn rewards, all that good stuff. Coinsbee.com. All right, let's get on with the show. So we begin over here at the Brave New Coin website, funnily enough. And we're going to go to the Bitcoin halving page, which is it's under data and charts, and then go to halving. And here we are, the Bitcoin halving. Now, I'm sure you know what the Bitcoin halving is, but of course, basically every 4 years, there is a Bitcoin halving in which the block reward essentially is reduced by half. So the next Bitcoin halving is the fourth Bitcoin halving, and that is when the current block reward of 6.25 Bitcoins will reduce to 3.125 Bitcoins. And of course, there is a timer, a countdown on the Brave New Coin halving page. So the countdown shows that we have 281 days essentially to go, roughly, to the next Bitcoin halving, which takes us through, I don't know, when do the math, April, May, something like that, next year. There's all sorts of price data as to where Bitcoin was at various stages of the previous halving cycles. Not going to go through all that now, but you can have a look at that. And of course, there's this fantastic chart here as well, which is speculative, of course, but fascinating nonetheless. Should point out that the guy that put this chart together and really put all the data together for this page and works across various parts of the crypto asset data business for a Brave New Coin. I'm going to have him on the podcast sometime within hopefully the next week or two, certainly within the next 3 weeks, I think. I won't say his name because I'm not sure if he wants to stay anonymous or not yet, but he did this chart, so we'll get him to explain the chart more when he comes on the show. But briefly, I can do it just briefly. You can see it's basically broken up into these 4-year halving cycles. So following each halving, that's a halving there, and there, is when traditionally we've had this bull market, which is in the green. And then, of course, following the peak of the bull market, we get the dreaded crypto bear market. It's the in the pink. And then following that, we range, really. This is ranging through the yellow area, but kind of broken up into these three little segments. You can call it, accumulation, ranging, expansion, and that's kind of where we are at the moment. We're in the ranging slowly towards the upside as we lead up to the next halving. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later. Let's keep it moving, folks. So you're probably aware, of course, that BlackRock, largest asset manager in the world, have filed for a spot Bitcoin ETF with the SEC. SEC, of course, famously has refused all Bitcoin spot ETFs to date. But James Sephrat and Eric Balkanis, I hope I'm saying those names right. They're Bloomberg reporters essentially, but specifically ETF reporters, ETF nerds, two of the biggest ETF nerds on the planet, really. So they, of course, follow this very closely. And I thought that was interesting. So a week or two ago, beginning of August, James said, based on recent events and new information, Eric and I are officially increasing our spot Bitcoin ETF approval odds to 65%. That's up from 50% a couple of weeks ago and up from 1% a few months ago. So that's quite striking, I think. We're now up to 65% chance of approval. That is bullish, I think. Kathy Wood, of course, Kathy Wood of ARK Investments. ARK, of course, have a spot ETF application and with the SEC as well. So Kathy Wood was on Bloomberg the other day. She says that if and when the SEC is going to approve a spot Bitcoin ETF, they won't just approve one. They are much more likely to approve a bunch at once. And I think that makes sense because they don't want to give the advantage to, just one organization or platform. I think it makes sense to perhaps approve a few at once. And look at this earlier today. So yeah, today, this morning, I woke up and saw this tweet from Eric at Bloomberg. He says, and he's quoting Galaxy CEO Mike Novogratz on an earnings call this morning. So Mike said, according to his contacts inside BlackRock and Invesco, the spot Bitcoin ETF approval is simply a matter of when, not if, and is likely in 4 to 6 months. So there you have it. Very, very bullish. Now, speaking of BlackRock, I'm not sure if you've seen this. This is slightly obscure. You've probably seen it if you hang out on crypto Twitter. If not, it's a fairly obscure BlackRock Bitcoin study essay thesis from last year, really. It looks at asset allocation for crypto, application of preferences for positive skewness. Now, important to note, this isn't really necessarily, BlackRock didn't come out and publish this and say, hey, this is BlackRock's position. It's more the position of these specific authors who happen to, I suppose, be employed by BlackRock. But the reason it's interesting, I'm not going to go into detail, it's just the highlights, if you like. They consider the role of Bitcoin as a direct investable asset. What's likely to happen if people start to invest at scale, and they find that here we are. Starting with a 60-40 equity bond portfolio, standard risk aversion, we find that the optimal Bitcoin allocation is a rather large 84.9%. Even though Bitcoin has an extremely large volatility, the pronounced positive skewness leads to large allocations and dominates in the utility function. So they're really just saying, Bitcoin is so compelling based on its return profile to date that it just makes sense to have a little bit of equities, a little bit of bonds, and around 85% Bitcoin. So I don't think anyone at BlackRock is saying necessarily that you should go out and do this. You'd have to be very comfortable with risk to have that kind of allocation. But nonetheless, based on the data, that is what they find. That's what the math says. 80 to 100% is an optimal Bitcoin allocation if you're just seeking pure performance and you're comfortable with risk. So again, it's an obscure paper. It's not endorsed by BlackRock necessarily, but it is written by some big brains in BlackRock. And look, if you're interested in finding this paper yourself, it is downloadable. That's what it's called. Please do search it out. Now, speaking of positive Bitcoin reports, I guess what we're really seeing is the narrative is shifting. Traditionally, we've seen a very negative narrative towards Bitcoin from traditional finance, from traditional media, but that seems to be shifting following Bitcoin's following BlackRock's application with the SEC for a spot ETF. It's a signal to the market that BlackRock are taking Bitcoin seriously, and already we're seeing a narrative shift based on that. So this is just one example. KPMG, can't get more legacy than KPMG. They published a report on Bitcoin's ESG impacts. I'm not going to go through the report again. You can find the report and download it yourself. That's what it's called. But again, it just is surprisingly positive and shows, it makes the case for Bitcoin as potentially contributing to the renewable energy growth around the world. And so again, it's just an example of that narrative shift. Now, if we go back to the BNC, Brave New Coin, Bitcoin halving page, I just wanted to, so briefly, if we're looking at this chart again, a lot of information presented on this chart. We're going to have the author of the chart on the show in the next few weeks. So look forward to that. But again, as I said, it's really just breaking Bitcoin up into the 4-year halving cycle. A little bit controversial as to, whether you can do that, but, based on the past, we have been able to. And there's just, this is one way of understanding that, but we can make it even simpler, really. So if we look at this chart here from me old mate, Rect Capital, he's done the same thing, but it's really just yearly candles like this. So you can see the bear markets obviously in red, and then apart from those every 4 years, we have 1 year in the red, but the other 3 candles are still green. And at the moment, that means if we've had the 1 green year following the last bear market of 2022, then we've really got 2 more green candles ahead, potentially. Again, this is another way of looking at it. You can see that 2 years after the halving, we have that red candle. Bitcoin dumps a lot. Everyone says crypto is dead. Bitcoin is dead. But, and they say, oh, Bitcoin, it's so volatile. Why would you invest in Bitcoin? Well, because the other 3 years, you can see the returns just pretty impressive by any stretch. So really, the key, of course, is being able to weather the storm, weather the down years. And if you can weather the down years and stay invested, stay in the market, so far in Bitcoin's journey, you have been able to recover a lot, shall we say. All right, let's use another chart. So this is by Dave the Wave, technical analyst on crypto Twitter. He's been on the show before as well. This is what Dave calls the logarithmic growth curve of Bitcoin. So he's charting it into the future based on diminishing returns over time as Bitcoin becomes further and further adopted and becomes a more mature asset class. That would make sense, that diminishing returns over time. Don't get me wrong, of course, still, 10, 20 years out, you can still see Bitcoin getting up to, $500,000, even $1 million per coin into the future if it, follows this chart. Which it has done so far. You can see at the top of the channel is the tops of the peak, tops of the bull market. Bottom of the channel is the depths of the bear market. So this shaded area at the bottom of the channel is what Dave likes to call the buy zone, because, of course, if you're buying here at the top of the channel, that you're likely buying at the top of the market, the top of that cycle. So it's going to take a much longer time for you to recover your investment, because it's got to crash down and slowly recover. It will get there eventually, but it will take longer. Of course, if you buy down here in the buy zone, you're much more likely to see a faster return. And we can see that if we go in a little bit closer here. Buy zone is a better risk reward profile. And of course, interestingly enough, we are in the buy zone at the moment, and we have been in the buy zone for a year. So, you remember back in sort of 2021 up here, I was looking down here and thinking, man, it's a long way down there to the buy zone. But sure enough, we returned and we've stayed here for a year. At some point, we're going to break out of the buy zone. And, you know, that could be a good potential signal that we're heading further up the cycle. But of course, yeah, that's when you do want to start to get wary as a potential buyer, more likely to be good risk reward profile down here. All right. As we start to finish off, just good to, you know, keep a note. This old chart's from a while ago, but kind of showing that Bitcoin has a long journey ahead. We've come a long way, but there's a long journey ahead for Bitcoin potentially become full global money, or even a widespread medium of exchange, even a reliable store of value. Of course, the thesis is that all this happens over time as Bitcoin's Lindy effect gets greater and greater and adoption continues. Now, if that is the case, of course, it makes sense that we should have eCash, internet money, magic internet money. That's what Bitcoin is. And of course, Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize winning economist, he predicted Bitcoin. He said that we need this kind of phenomenon back 24 years ago. So let's see what he has to say.
I think that the internet is going to be one of the major forces for reducing the role of government. The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable eCash, a method whereby on the internet you can transfer funds from A to B without A knowing B or B knowing A. The way in which I can take a $20 bill and hand it over to you, and there's no record of where it came from. And you may get that without knowing who I am. That kind of thing will develop on the internet, and that will make it even easier for people to use the internet, I think.
Yeah, so there you go. It's simple as that. It really is describing Bitcoin, and we now have a Bitcoin, of course. And you know, it just goes to show. I like this chart as well because it shows world GDP over the last 2 millennia. Of course, for a long time, nothing is really happening as sapiens, you know, were hunter-gatherers and living in little tribes. Then suddenly, in the last 100, 200 years, the world has changed due to technology, really. And you can see we have experienced this exponential growth in the hockey stick as a GDP just goes astronomical and all sorts of things become possible. So it's funny, if you sort of look at it day to day, people can say, oh, my life is pretty typical. I have a good grasp of what is normal versus what is weird. And people imagining different futures with digital people and AI and space travel, cryptocurrency. It's all just silly sci-fi speculation. But I think this chart just goes to show that, you know, we're starting to experience exponential change, and a lot can happen in one generation, and half a generation, and quarter of a generation. A lot can happen in a decade, and half a decade. Pace of that change is accelerating. We've seen it happen with AI, and you know, a lot can happen with the advent of Bitcoin and crypto, and the ramifications of that are just still starting to play out. So of course, easy to look forward. You know, this is a hypothetical cover, but who's to say we get to June 25 and the Economist could say the new global reserve currency, and why we were too stupid to see it coming, because it's been here all along. We're just on the journey. You know, everyone knows we need it, and exponential change is happening. It can happen fast, but it only seems obvious with the benefit of hindsight. All right, let's finish this off with a great quote from David Bowie, who said this back in 1999. He's talking about the internet, but you can kind of, again, apply it to any exponential technology, AI, crypto. I think this is a great quote. Let's see what David Bowie has to say.
I don't think we've even seen the tip of the iceberg. I think the potential of what the internet is going to do to society, both good and bad, is unimaginable. I think we're actually on the cusp of something exhilarating and terrifying.
It's just a tool, though, isn't it?
No, it's not. No. No, it's an alien life form.
What do you think? I mean, when you think then about the
Is
future
there life
of-
on Mars? Yes, it's just landed here.
But it's simply a different delivery system there. You're arguing about something more profound.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about the actual context, and the state of content is going to be so different to anything that we can really envisage at the moment, where the interplay between the user and the provider will be so in simpatico. It's going to crush our ideas of what mediums are all about.
Exactly right, Mr. Bowie. Thank you for sharing your thoughts from 1999. Couldn't be more prescient, I think. All right. Well, that's the end of the show, really. I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you're able to watch on YouTube. Just some fun data points related to the halving and ETFs, all that good stuff, the Bitcoin narrative. Yeah, who knows? Will any of this come to play out? I don't know, but it's going to be fun to see what happens nonetheless. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Coinsbee, our new sponsor. More crypto honey for your crypto money. Just go to coinsbee.com. Link is in the show notes to see what they're all about. But that is it for today, folks. Thanks for listening. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.